Members, it is the appointed time for the meeting and we have formed a quorum. We have two agenda items today. Number one, Dr. KWOK moves a motion proposing that we take an overseas duty visit. Last time, the Secretariat did a study and it was found that London, Sydney, and Taiwan, Australia have been very successful with Bazaars. Their governments also have complementary measures in order to support bazaar organizing bodies. So Mr. Kwok is proposing that we conduct an overseas visit. What do you think, members? Dr. Kwok is here. It's great. Dr. Kwok, why don't you let us know your proposal? Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the Secretariat for conducting a study for the last meeting. It is clear that if you look at neighboring regions, maybe as near as Taiwan, they have a very mature bazaar culture. It's not just a policy. I can see that the administration also supports, well, at least in the last term of government, the organizing of bazaars. Therefore, I'd like to ask members to consider whether we should go overseas to take a look. We have been to many places like Taiwan, but of course, we'd like to see the actual operation of bazaars, how it was first launched and what problems they had at the beginning. Also, some deputations proposed whether cooked food could be sold at bazaars. As you know, in Taiwan or Japan, there are bazaar operators in the streets selling cooked food. But then there is also cultural bazaars or heritage bazaars. I'm just citing Taiwan as an example because it is near to us, but there are other places that we can go. I'd like members to consider this, but I know perhaps we cannot do it in the summer, perhaps after the summer. And we also have to choose a place. I think the Secretariat can make some proposals. Thank you, Chair. Dr. Kwok, do you have any preference vis-a-vis the place of visit? I can only think of Taiwan because it's a Chinese community. Hong Kong people know Taiwan very well. And when they come back from Taiwan, Hong Kong people would ask, why is it that bazaars are flourishing in Taiwan, but we don't have those in Hong Kong? So if you ask me, I would say Taiwan. First, I'd like to tell members, but I know you know this very well. During every term of LegCo, every member has $50,000 for overseas duty visits. All these must be approved by the House Committee. It is not just a day trip. So we need to liaise with the governments or organizations of overseas places. So the Secretariat does need a suitable lead time for us to make the preparations, and they may need 3 to 4 months. And since we need the approval of HC before we start the preparation, so normally speaking, our subcommittee should end its work by December, and there may not be enough time for the Secretariat to finish its work. So today's proposal is just, or discussion is just something in principle. And if the HC would allow us to extend our work for 3 months, then the Secretariat will have enough time to make preparations. So we need to discuss members' wishes and the place of visit, but that will only be in principle, because we'll have to see if the HC will allow us to extend our work. And I'd like to ask members whether you have any views. Jeremy Tam. Thank you, Chair. I would think that the crux of the matter is not the place of visit itself, but examples that have started from scratch and which are in recent times. For example, in some places, the bazaars would have been there for 20 years, and we wouldn't know how it all started. But we should choose a place, whether near or far, which has just started to organize bazaars like last year, and we would be able to know their teething problems. That would be somewhere we should go because we can learn from them. I'd like to ask the Secretariat, if I remember correctly, the study was about London and Australia, which have started bazaars only recently. But Dr. Kwok was thinking about a close enough place, which is also a Chinese community. Well, it's all right, but you know, in Taiwan there are many bazaars. I'm thinking of bazaars that are more modern. So the thing is not the country, but their history of organizing bazaars. Right, thank you. I understand. Other members? Should we conduct a site visit overseas? Mr. Stephen Ho, Madam Chair, in principle, I would say that we have already missed the best opportunity to conduct this visit. In the last term, we consider whether we should have a duty visit overseas, but it was vetoed. And then there was no bottom-up policy within the administration, so we thought we should go. But now it is the end of the year, and if we now think of a place to visit, I don't think it is a good opportunity, and we should use public money efficiently. So I think we should finish our work in December 1st. And if it is decided that the SC will continue its work, then it would be more appropriate to discuss it then. Ms. Alice Mack. Chairman, we don't even know whether we can continue our work with an extension. Let us not waste time. Let us decide on the site visit or overseas visit after we have an extension. Because if now we talk about places and then the Secretariat will do some exploration, and then if we don't get extended, then the Secretariat will be wasting its time. So let us have an extension first before we decide on a duty visit. I think even if we agree in principle today, the Secretariat will not start its work right away. It will start work only after the extension is approved. Okay, but I get your view. You think this is not the time to discuss it. Mr. Andrew Wen. Thank you, Chair. I support Mr. Stephen Ho and Ms. Alice Mack's description, but I have a different conclusion. In the last term, members worked very hard. As you know, many items would have to be revived in a second term because the administration did not respond. Now, different parties and affiliations have banded together, and now the administration is responding. So this is actually the best opportunity. Now, I don't know whether the administration would just take it up without the LegCo's participation. That would be best because we have so many items on our plate. So I think this is a good opportunity. I agree with the two members' description, but I have a different conclusion. I think we can take on board Ms. Alice Mack's view, and that is we can discuss this with conditions. Of course, if we don't have an extension, there will be no way we can go. But I have the same starting point from the two members, but I have a different conclusion. So you mean, in principle, we can discuss it? Yes, I would say we should discuss this on a conditional basis. That is, conditional on extension to be approved by HC. Thank you. Mr. Leung Yu Chung. Chairman, if we don't get an extension, we don't need to say more. But we are making an assumption that there will be an extension. If we can have a chance to go overseas, I would say we should go and see whether there are policies that would help promote bazaars, because this is what we are asking the administration to do. Of course, we need to see its operation, but also the rationale in the policy and the difficulties people have met up with. This is what we want to bargain with the administration, because we are asking the administration for a policy. We need to see how other governments have done in other places. Mr. Yu Si Wing. Thank you, Chair. Hello. I agree with Mr. Jeremy Tam. If bazaars have been in place for many years, well, we have also Temple Street. Have we succeeded? Yes, we have succeeded. But if you want to look at a bazaar, then go to Temple Street. But I think we should look at how people operated bazaars only recently, how hurdles were overcome, how they won support from different parties, and in the end, they succeeded. Now, we should look for such a place before we decide on an overseas visit, because there are many successful bazaars all over the world. There are many night markets which do very well in Taiwan. But perhaps we should ask the Secretariat to identify one or two places in the category I described before we decide whether we should go. That's better than deciding to go and then find a place, because it's not meaningful to go to Taiwan anyway. Let me see if I have understood you correctly. Today, we discussed whether we should go in principle, and then the condition is to ask the Secretariat to make initial proposals, and then if the HC approves our extension, then we will really study the issue. Mr. Stephen Ho.
I hope that this can be cost effective, so maybe the Secretariat can write up a report now, and I think it has been done last time. There was a report about, well, maybe we can have a report about Singapore or Taiwan's bazaars and know something about their policies, and that would be conducive to our discussions. That would be more effective. If you ask me today whether we should pay such a visit overseas, I have a bit of reservation. Well, at the last meeting, we have talked about this, that is, conducting a study on the bazaars in 4 other places. So for each place or country, they would have their own bazaar policies. The Secretariat has been working very hard to conduct such a research for us. So that's a very good foundation. So I think that's enough. The difficulty is whether we can extend this SC and whether we can find an appropriate country to visit. Let us vote. Do we really need to vote? Well, because we would have to submit this to the House Committee for approval. Maybe we can do this. Just now, members have given us very different views, and 2 members have expressed their objection. Some members agree to this proposal, and some other members have added certain principles. So do you agree on these principles? That is, in principle, we think we can go on such a duty visit. But first of all, let us ask our clerk to conduct some studies on the locations. And with the approval of the House Committee, that is, if our subcommittee can be extended, and if our trip is approved, then we may be able to go. Do you object to this principle? Now, if our SC cannot be extended, but the House Committee has approved our trip, then the work of the Secretariat will be wasted. So, for this voting, I think it should be done later. That is, after the SC has been extended. Yes, that can be done as well. But lately, the House Committee, I think the House Committee will be discussing the possible extension of our subcommittee in the near future. So maybe we should let the House Committee know. So when will the House Committee talk about this? I think the chairperson means that if the SC is to be extended, then first the members here should agree first, and then this will be submitted to the HC. Originally, our term would end in December, so maybe they will discuss it in November. But some other subcommittees have already decided on extension. I don't know whether the House Committee will discuss the extension of the other committees earlier. Well, Chairwoman, this is what I think. I think, first of all, the House Committee should approve the extension of our subcommittee first, and then we will talk about our overseas visits. So this is not an appropriate time to talk about it right now. Okay, let's wait for the House Committee's extension first. And this is to let members know that Dr. KWOK has such a proposal. So let's move on to agenda item 2, relationship among bazaars, public markets, and similar facilities in private property. And we have the different officials from the Food and Health Bureau, as well as officers from the Housing Department. So we are very familiar with each other already. They are members from the Food and Health Bureau and Housing Department. Will the government first take us through today's paper first? Well, at the chairperson's request, we have provided a relatively simple paper to members. The title is Relationship Among Bazaars, Public Markets, and Similar Facilities in Private Property. Well, I think we cannot simply say whether there are relationships among these premises. So we would have to look at the bazaars that are actually held at these places and the goods they sell, etc. As for bazaars in Hong Kong, it is stated in our paper that bazaars are a neutral platform because there are different types of bazaars. Well, some are for providing opportunities to the grassroots to start their own business, and some are for promoting local economy and tourism, and some are for promoting cultural creativity. In Hong Kong, we also have several farm fests, and lately we have farm fest promoting organic watermelons. As for FHT public markets, they mainly sell fresh food, and also some dry goods are sold, and services would also be provided. And of course, we also have cooked food centers. Bazaars also have cooked food to be sold as well. So for facilities in private properties, sometimes they would also set up bazaars. So bazaars may not only be in public places. So for bazaars in private properties, they can sell different types of goods, and some of the goods they sell may overlap with the goods that are provided in the vicinity. Well, we have heard voices saying that these different bazaars and markets can complement each other, but some other people also opine that there may be competitions among these different types of bazaars and markets. Now, let me take bazaar as an example. If there is a shop very close to a bazaar, and if they are selling the same goods, then there may be competitions. As for public markets and facilities in private property, most of the time they're more regulated. For example, FHT market, it's located in a fixed situation, etc. And for bazaars, they are of a shorter duration. So we will have to look at the scale of the organizer and the trade mix of the event. They can be very different. Some would be selling cooked food, some would be selling other commodities. So in terms of facilities and management, there are basic differences. For example, FHD markets are managed by FHD and is supported by different departments. As for bazaars, the organizer would be responsible. So the nature and management of bazaars are very different. So our paper wants to highlight these points. Thank you. Members, do you have questions? Mr. Leung Chi-Chang. 4 minutes, including questions and answers. Yes, thank you. As for bazaars, as far as I understand, there are different types. In Tin Shui Wai, there are 2 bazaars now. One is in Tin Shau Bazaar, and the other one is in Tin Yu Estate. The Tin Yu one is simpler because it's only held at weekends, and it has only been done for a dozen times. We don't know whether further approvals will be given in the future. As for Tin Shau Bazaar, it's next to a Link shopping mall. I don't know whether people objected to it in the early stage. However, when we look at the stakeholders in the surrounding, I don't think there's a direct relationship. Now, for example, if I set up a bazaar here, it doesn't mean that your business will be affected negatively, and thus I should listen to you. The most important thing is whether the bazaar is welcome by local residents and whether the bazaar's operation will have a direct impact on the private market, which leads to a level playing field. Now, for the weekend bazaar in Tin Shui Wai, it is said that there will be competition between this bazaar and the shopping mall next to it. Now, because the store rental at the bazaar tends to be cheaper, the government says that this should adopt a bottom-up approach. That is, if the local residents welcome it and if it's supported by the relevant district council, a bazaar can be established. I haven't heard objection voices in Tin Shui Wai. So if there are people objecting to the establishment of bazaar in other districts, what would you do? I think you will see many more applications in the future. In Tin Shui Wai, the situation is more different. So for the government's bazaars, it may be held in public places. So what will you do if you receive complaints? Thank you. When it comes to the development of bazaar in Hong Kong, I think there has been a process. Mr. Leung talked about organizations setting up bazaars, and they may encounter problems, as Mr. Leung depicted. Now we adopt a bottom-up approach. That is, this should be first discussed in the community, and it should receive the support of the relevant district council. So when district councils discuss bazaars, some may support the organization of it, and some may have reservations. So I think they all have different reasons. Just now, Mr. well, has given us some examples. If we look at the two examples he cited and the latest developments, I think we should pay attention to several points. For Tin Sao Bazaar, in the initial stage, it was a bazaar to provide opportunities to the grassroots. So an organization was commissioned to do the job. Mr. Leung said that there were the link markets in the surrounding areas, but we have to look at it in a chronological order. I think the bazaars were there first, and then the link shopping malls were established. So for shopping markets, of course, they have their positioning, and Tin Sao Bazaar has also make some adjustments to its operation in the past years. Just now, Mr. Leung mentioned something very important.
When bazaars take place at a certain venue, should rental be charged? If yes, how much? Should the applicant be paying it, or should the applicant charge it from hirers of the stalls? It can create very different effect, and when bazaars actually develop, departments will have to resolve this problem, because in certain places and under certain circumstances, departments charge low rent or even rent out the venue free of charge. It depends on the nature of the bazaars. Sorry, I did not touch the microphone. It was not my fault. Well, but anyway, we need to face up to these problems, and we are all ears to members' views. You don't have a follow-up, right? Maybe you can have a second round later. Next one, Mr. Siu Ka-chun. Thank you, Chair. If you look at this paper, it's a very short one. It repeatedly talks about an issue, and that is there is no exact definition for the term bazaar. I find this strange because you have repeated it time and again. This may be what is the present situation, but why don't you try to define it? Why do you just allow this situation to go on where there is no definition for the term bazaar? And you say these bazaars should be operated only within a short while, that they are not permanent or non-recurrent. I think what you say with these three terms are more or less the same thing. In these few months, I think we were talking about systematizing or normalizing bazaars, and if we are to do that, first of all, you need a definition, or else we would not know whether we are talking about the same thing when we say bazaars, and that would unnecessarily muddle the waters. And then the last line, mutual competition may also arise. Of course there is competition, but how should we treat it? Is it going to be positive or vicious competition? You haven't told us your view on this. We have heard the administration always say that competition is good. When there is competition, there will be progress, and competition will bring about improvements, you used to say. And if bazaars are going to compete with public markets or private property, then do you welcome it or not? Certainly. I think you may be over-worried. If you think bazaars will create vicious competition, I think you are scaring yourself too much. It's not easy to have bazaars. They could not be organized too often, and products sold in a bazaar would be very different from those in a supermarket. And if you think a once in a while bazaar will have a negative impact on markets or those in private properties and affect their room for survival, I believe you are over worried. Maybe this is a kind of moral scare, let's say. So can you respond to these two terms, the definition and also competition? Thank you, Chair. Sorry.
其實主席，我喺介紹個文件嘅。
Chairman, when I introduced the paper, when I said something about bazaars at present times in Hong Kong, I was just letting members know how bazaars are being operated in Hong Kong. And that is why in the paper we have said that we cannot see any exact definition for the term bazaar. That is a fact. I explained that in Hong Kong there are so many varieties, and they are for different purposes. I was talking about for promoting arts, for promoting the local economy, or for alleviating poverty. Some are of a bigger scale, and Mr. Shiu was talking about those that are provisional. But in fact, there are permanent bazaars as well, as mentioned by Mr. Leung. The one in Tin Sao is in fact a long-term bazaar. So what I want to say is, it's not whether we have a definition. I'm just trying to give an objective description of bazaars in Hong Kong now. I think I also explained that the relationship between bazaars, public markets, and private property cannot be described in one word. There are views from both sides. On one side, people talk about complementarity. As Mr. Shiu was saying, competition could be beneficial to both. But then there is another school of thought. They say it depends on the nature of the bazaars. There may be competition, and shops along the streets may not want to see that kind of competition. I'm not making a value judgment here. I'm saying, Chairman, if you ask us to look at the present relationship between the different operators, I'm just saying that there could be this kind of relationship. Chairman, I am in fact asking the administration to make a value judgment on competition. Do they encourage it or not? And secondly, Chairman, I don't want to define for the sake of defining it, but the administration is not defining this term, so you don't have to respond to the problem. You say there cannot be a definition of subdivided units, so you cannot gather the statistics, and then you would leave it to different people to talk about the scale of the problem. So don't resort to this tool or trick. We have the Commission on Poverty anyway, so don't resort to this line of thinking. Well, Mr. Zhang, I think you are giving us answers as those in the first meeting, but in fact we have been having meetings for a year. We were talking about different types of bazaars. Well, when you say there is no definition, I think you are talking about different types of bazaars. And Mr. Shiu was saying, yes, there are different types of bazaars, so which type should be held where? Are you worried about vicious competition? If you are, then how can we turn it into beneficial or benevolent competition? And you have gained experience with dry goods bazaar or cooked food bazaar, then perhaps you can come to a view on these. I understand it takes time. I would ask Mr. Shiu to stay behind, and then we can have a specific discussion on this in the second round. Now I give the time to, or floor to, Mr. Yu Si-wing. Thank you, Chair. Just now the officials say there is no definition on bazaars. And because of this, there will be many applications. I gather a group of people. They think they have some articles or to sell, or they like to operate some cooked food business. I understand that if there is such an application, it will be a bottom-up process. You will consult the district, the stakeholders, and then you do your own assessment, and then you come to a view to the applicant. So it's bottom-up. However, people's views tend to differ, because people will say you do not have any yardstick. You may listen to a district councillor or a shop operator who may object, and so you do not approve the application, and then people will speculate whether you come to a judgment or decision under certain pressure. This is not fair to you. Maybe some of your staff may reject the application because they don't want to tackle a complicated situation. So can you do it top down, meaning that the applicant should abide by certain principles, like, for example, what you sell must be of the same type of produce that nearby shops are offering, and also you must be some distance away from the shops, but you should not occupy the entire pavement. I think that's easier. You let people know your criteria. This is what we do with rent out cars. It was first said that you should first buy a car and then people apply for a license. But now it is the other way around. People would make the application and know whether the TD would approve it, and then they would buy a car. So can you consider doing this? Perhaps this is a question for Ms. Diane Wong. Thank you, Chair. We have had many meetings. We have discussed it within the department. Last time, deputations and members mentioned that this involves different departments and the procedures are now scattered on different websites. It doesn't facilitate understanding of the entire procedure. We initially think we should draw up a guide together with departments to facilitate application. Mr. Yu's proposal is very much worth our pursuit. Deputations have said that they are grouping around with the principles. And when we consult the districts or stakeholders, should we just react to their objection and reject applications, or should there be a process of communication? Maybe the applicants can make some concessions so objectors and other stakeholders will find it acceptable. Now, Mr. Yu mentioned certain basic principles and how both sides can be accommodating to each other. We will consider this when we draw up that guide. Chairman, I think the administration should have accumulated experience in handling applications. This will be better than having applicants grouping around. I think if you can do it, please do it quick and please come to consult us. I also like to say that the FEHD should understand that you have the power to approve applications. I'm not saying we should lose sight of district interests, but as Ms. Wong says, it is not that you would certainly reject applications just because of opposition. But if there is no direct competition, then perhaps you should exercise your powers in a more proper way. And this was mentioned in the last meeting as well, so please go back and take another look. Next, Leung Yu-chung. Just now the DS says that there are many types of bazaars in Hong Kong with different objectives, including poverty alleviation or the promotion of culture. I don't know whether there is one that would promote anti-monopoly. Well, the last CE said that the only way to resist Link is to have more bazaars around Link malls. This is the way to counter Link. Of course, he did not use the word monopoly. Well, but that's exactly what he said. And it's not just the last CE. This new one has said the same thing. Now, this is important. As you know, Link monopoly happens in many housing estates, and there is a big impact on livelihood. The local culture and local consumption pattern have been changed. People's lifestyle has been changed. Now, how can we counter it? If there are bazaars in housing estates, we can create another kind of culture and another kind of consumption pattern. But it's not just Link. Link is selling out its properties to other people. So in a housing estate, you have two owners. One, housing department. The other one, the operator. And when an application is made, the housing department will say, I cannot call the shots. You have to ask the other owner whether the other owner agrees. But if that other owner doesn't agree, what happens? That's the biggest problem. Two CEs have made this proposal. They want to counter monopoly.
So if there is just one owner, it would be different. So what do you think of my remark? I've heard about this KWOK estate application. Link has a mall there, and Link objects to it. So what happens? What role does the government play? The government wants to counter monopoly. But would it side with the operator and reject the application? Well, I would like to clarify Mr. Leung Yiu-chung's question. I don't think Link has rejected the application, but we want to ask the government what is the role of the housing department. I don't think the housing department has acted as a moderator in this case. So have you tried to moderate in the KWOK estate incident? Well, for the HD's role is to coordinate different stakeholders so as to narrow gaps. For housing estates, they are regulated by land leases and titles. So we have to obtain the consent of other owners. Well, for HD, we try to narrow the gaps among different stakeholders so that bazaars can be held. Yes, they try to coordinate. Of course, that's good. But in theory, you are the major owner, so you don't have a say. Does HD have the power? That is, if Link objects, you can still give an approval. Well, we are just one of the owners. We are one owner, and Link is the other owner. So you are on equal par. The shares are the same. Yes, there's no difference. Well, we are all owners. In terms of identity, it's not about shares. Well, I think for some places, if you have more shares, then you can be regarded as the major owner, and you can cast more votes. Well, Chairman, maybe I can supplement. For estates with more than one owner, they would have deed of mutual covenants and lease. So we will have to look at the use of the common areas and whether the users comply with the deed of mutual covenants and lease. So we would also consult the lands department, and lands department would always ask us to consult the other owners. So it is not directly related to the number of shares. So if on a lot there are other owners, then we have to reach a consensus. We need to obtain the consent of the other owners before we can get an approval from the Lands Department in accordance with the lease. Well, is that really the case? Is this tantamount to legal advice? I think they can only give you an answer after the meeting. I think you have to clarify this point. And if you say that you have the same share as Link, then nothing can be done. So we don't want to listen just to the Lands Department's advice. We also want legal advice. So I think if you look at the title, you really have to look at the number of shares. How can a minor owner affect the overall operation? Can you seek legal advice? Now, this would help to clarify the role of Link in housing estates. So for the HD, can you try to seek legal advice? That is, once Link objects, the HD would have no say. As Mr. Wong said just now, even if Link or other owners object, the housing department will try its best to coordinate. So we would have to look at the reasons for objection, and then we will talk to the proponent as well as the other owner. We would ask the proponents if the proposal can be amended so that eventually they can get an approval. So if DMC and title are involved, we have to comply with the terms therein. And if we need to obtain an approval from the Lands Department, and of course, it can set certain requirements for us to meet. So in the course of all this, we are trying our best to coordinate. We hope that a consensus can be forged so that Bazaars can be established. Now, of course, you can do your coordination, but it doesn't mean that you will always be successful, because some of the housing estate malls have been sold to other operators, and it may not be that easy to bargain with them. So I don't know how successful you can be when you do the coordination. So what if you fail in your coordination? That is the question. And Lands Department asks you to do this, but does it advise you from the perspective of the legal points in the DMC? Right? You have to work in accordance with the law. You don't just listen to the Lands Department. The HD says that it would coordinate by itself. It can do that. And if Lands Department says no because of the title, then what will happen? But now we are querying the power of the Lands Department. So this is a legal issue. Maybe we should write to the relevant government department to clarify this point. Now, HD is an owner, so according to the number of shares, how much power do they have and what role should they play? And also, what's the Lands Department's view? I think they both have their views because they are in different positions. Now maybe we should write to the Lands Department to seek further clarification. Now is my first round of questions. Just now you've been talking about Bazaars in new housing estates, and this has been implemented for 2 months. Many organizations think that this is a good news. However, they think that, well, only for the first time the HD would take the initiative to help. For example, the Kowok Estate incident, Link didn't object, but HD didn't coordinate. So the whole process was dragged on. So can HD adopt a more balanced approach is there a clear mechanism so that the organizations would know that you have consulted Link and Link has given you a green light? So can you give us a clearer picture? And secondly, just now, well, last time you talked about charities holding bazaars in housing estate. Up to now, you haven't provided us with the relevant form and you haven't uploaded it onto your website. So when organizations try to set up bazaars, your frontline staff would tell them that according to past practice, cash cannot be used in bazaars. Well, you have been implemented this for 2 months, yet the frontline staff still don't know anything about the new arrangements. So when will the documents be uploaded onto the website, or when will it be given to us, and when will you tell the frontline staff? Thank you, Madam Chair, for your questions. At the last meeting, we said that we already have an established mechanism and we have informed frontline staff about the principles that they have to take into account if people apply for the setting up of bazaars in public housing estate. Well, we will look at the Lai Kok estate incident, and we will also coordinate among different stakeholders. Now, for bazaars in public housing estates, is still a trial period. So we will be looking at different areas, and we may also consider revising the form. So at the moment, we are not uploading the form onto our website. If organizations would like to make an application, the housing estate management will be willing to help. I think it's just an isolated case. It's not that isolated. Other than Lai Kok Estate, before this meeting, some organizations came here to protest because at Yuan Estate and Susuan Estate, they encountered the same problems. That is, the frontline staff said that according to past practice, you cannot use cash in the bazaars. So at different housing estates, we see the same situation. That is, frontline staff do not know that cash can be used in bazaars now. And for Lai Kok Estate, it seems that the HD has not been coordinating. So, Mr. Wong, can you give the documents and the application form to us as early as possible so that the organizations can show such documents to the frontline staff? Now, for the meeting on the 17th of June, we said that we will try to answer all the questions and then give the relevant documents to the LegCo in one go. Yes, it's almost a month, so please give us the information as soon as possible. We want the organizations to know how to talk to the frontline staff. Well, the frontline staff should be clear. Perhaps the applicants hasn't submitted a clear proposal, so that's misunderstanding. I'm not going to argue with you, but the organizations told me that is what the frontline staff said. That is, cash cannot be used in bazaars. It's not about whether they have a clear written proposal or not, because the organizations have a lot of experience. So please give us the reference documents so that better coordination can be done. Now is the second round of questions, and I think for Mr. Teo Ka-chen, your answer was not answered thoroughly, right? You want to ask your question again? I asked about competition and what's the position of the government. And I've also asked about definition. And if the Deputy Secretary would like to explain more, that would be good. Well, I don't think the HD should be so defensive. Now, if the frontline staff do not know, then they do not know. So you just need to remind them. You don't have to be so defensive. You don't need to say that maybe the proposal is not clear. The chairlady said that we have not received your documents after a month. This is undesirable. When Can you give us the documents? Do we have to wait for 1 more month and remind you again? This is a follow-up. And I would like to tell you this. Maybe you have read it in the newspaper already. The new CE, Mrs. Carrie Lam, says that our society needs hope and rehabilitation. I think Bazaars can also achieve that. In the newspaper, we see this term that a site or a multi-purpose site. It says that the government can build more markets, or a site can be used for multi-purposes. Well, Bazaar is a multi-purpose site. The Deputy Secretary says that there are many different types of bazaars. So bazaar can serve different purposes. For our subcommittee, it started in the term of CY Leung, and now we have a new government. Will we be able to see more green lights and more strength from your side so that a site can be used for different purposes?
The original proposer may have to submit to different departments, but now I'd like you to systematize the setup. But we have been repeating our points for so many years. Now that we have the new CE, and she is talking about multi-purpose sites, and she is talking about hope, do you think you would be facilitated in your work because there will be more support, so you don't only mark time and repeat what you have said? Mr. Zhang or Ms. Wong, there are a few questions, and that is, how do you view this kind of competition? Can you turn it into some kind of benevolent competition so we can counter-link? Because CY Leung and Carrie Lam says that this is a major obstacle, and also other follow-up questions by Mr. Shiu, including the multi-purpose site issue. Thank you, Chair. Talking about competition, our position is definitely to encourage benevolent competition and not vicious competition. That's for sure. And as I said, we have adopted a bottom-up approach in developing bazaars in Hong Kong. The organizer has a lot of autonomy to arrange for bazaars. As Mr. Shiu said, there are different types of bazaars. We would be happy to see benevolent competition. Mr. Shiu asked whether the situation will change with the new administration. As civil servants, we certainly will support the work of the new administration. And whether it's the last term or this term administration, in the policy agendas, markets have been mentioned. And we will act according to the policy agenda of the administration. The new administration has just assumed office. We will be watching developments closely. Mr. Shiu mentioned the housing department. Can I defer to HD staff? Mr. Wong? Thank you, Mr. Shiu, for the question. We thank you for your view. We note the members' view. About the application form, in the last meeting, we did not submit our own forms to LegCo, but we can certainly do this to let you know how we do our coordination. Well, yes, last time you said it would be submitted to the LegCo after the last meeting, but you did not do it. I hope you will do it this time, that is after this meeting. In fact, there is a more coordination to be done. The form is only one of those. Mr. Ted Hui. I heard from the FHD that normally speaking you encourage positive competition, but let us look at the paper submitted. Well, it's a little sloppy. There is only one page and you have not said much in the paper. However, you do say that usually the venues are not permanent and the operation is non-recurrent and of short duration. And then you say that if the venues of bazaars are in vicinity of public markets and facilities in private properties, mutual competition may also arise. I don't think you are telling us that competition is something you desire. You seem more to be saying that competition is something that you have to resolve. So come clean, because you said you would support competition, but your paper seems to say otherwise. As other members said, Link is monopolizing the market. There is no competition in housing estates. Now, if the bazaars are not permanent, they are non-recurrent, and they are just one-off with different themes, they will bring about benevolent competition, of course. And in a housing estate, if people patronize FEHD markets or private markets in nearby places, then apart from competition, people may also get a different kind of shopping experience. It may be an arts bazaar or a farm produce bazaar. I think you should encourage those. And as other members asked, I have also heard why you could not have bazaars in housing estates. But I think you are just passing the buck around departments. Suddenly you say you have to look at the land lease, you have to ask for the permission of the owners. But these are not legal requirements, as I understand. It is just your policy that you want to consult everybody. You have to make sure that no one objects before you would do it. But is it the way to push a policy if you do have this conviction that bazaars are good for public housing estates, that it is a good kind of experience as a value, then you should set that policy to allow that to happen. But I haven't seen the housing department doing this. Can you tell me how you have improved or streamlined the procedure so bazaars can take place in housing estates? Maybe Mr. Wong? Thank you, Mr. Hui, for your question. As I said at the last meeting, you understand that public housing estates are housing a lot of people, and the ground floor is for the use of everybody, and the open space is for everybody, and we must get the support of other stakeholders before we can use the common area in housing estates. You must understand that the common area is for people to spend their leisure time. Some people like to have bazaars, some people like to just have the open space. So they have different aspirations. And as for the DMC, the housing department is the manager of the deed of mutual covenant, and we must comply with the terms of the DMC. That is required by law. The DMC terms will have to make sure that no tenants would flout the land lease terms. Sometimes the land lease will say there must be so much recreation ground, so much open space, and also the pickup drop-off area for car parks, and also the GPA, etc. And therefore, this may be affected to a different extent depending on the actual application of a bazaar. The EMAC, Estate Management Advisory Committee, represents residents, and we will listen to them. But the HD will try to coordinate and narrow the differences in opinion of different stakeholders. You said you need to have no objection from stakeholders before you would allow a bazaar. So can you tell me from your experience who objected? Was it Link? And secondly, there is a lot of common space in public housing estates, and many community activities can take place there, like one of carnivals. Why did you always allow those? because they are also using the common areas in public housing estates. Why do you have a completely different attitude towards bazaars? Well, yes, we are talking about different activities. As you said, those are one-off and it's simpler. And they don't set up a lot of facilities. They usually would provide activities to local residents and to enhance their fire safety awareness, or activities for aging in place. Those are easier to tackle, but for bazaars, they may sell different things. They may set up different installations. Would fire escape routes be blocked? Would there be noise? Would there be other disturbances caused? Therefore, we have different considerations. Let us look at the Tin Yiu market or bazaar. We consulted different stakeholders and they put forward specific proposals on the number of stalls, the configuration, and also fire escape routes. He did not answer who objected. Was it Link? At Tin Yiu Estate, there was Link next to the place, and Link did not object. The only condition is that there should be no contravention to the DMC and the land lease. Okay, I'd like to ask my second round of questions. I'd like to talk about housing estates and the competitors. Mr. Zhang or Mr. Wong, I think you gave us rather vague answers. You said you would do the consultation. But as you know, even district affairs are politicized nowadays. If there are opposition voices and once you say there is opposition, then no bazaars should take place. So FEHD or HD, do you have a role to play? And that is, you set up a clear and transparent mechanism to coordinate different stakeholders and their objections, and you have to come to a view whether the objections are reasonable. If they say there is competition, then would it be that specifically the bazaars actually do not create direct competition with Link or other shop owners? You have to come to a view as to whether that objection is reasonable. You have to do the coordinating role so you can allow bazaars to take place without considerations of district politics. Secondly, do you cap the time for bazaars? Because if you do this, there can still be monopoly. I'm just saying that organizations with different background should be considered in a balanced way so they can also organize bazaars. Say if you approve one organizer for a year and then the next year, then the so-called competition may be fake because you may know the organizations better, and so they can monopolize the operating of bazaars in a public housing estate. So I believe you should set a time gap between the organizing of similar bazaars so that you give the opportunity to as many people as possible. Mr. Wong. On the Tin Yiu Bazaar, it is temporary and it's only for 15 weeks. I agree with the chair and will consider her view. We don't have a lot of experience with Tin Yiu Bazaar yet because it has only applied for 15 weeks. Well, that is exactly what I'm asking you. We can do it step by step. You have now relaxed your way of doing things, so you allow bazaars in housing estates, and we are giving you views now. It seems you will say there will be a cap for the bazaars to go on, say, at most 2 months, so different people will be able to get a chance. Will you consider such a duration gap? We'll have to look at the actual applications, but we'll consider your view. Of course, you have to consider each application on its own merit, but do you have a general principle to set a duration cap for bazaars? The HD will follow the administration's policy. If the administration says there should be a duration cap, we'll consider it. But it really depends on the applications. Some may propose a longer duration, some shorter. But say if their application exceeds your general principle, say if you allow 2 months, then at least you have a general principle to go by and tell them to shorten the duration. You have to have your own consideration before you consider the applications, because there could be monopoly in the end. We don't want to see anyone monopolizing the bazaars. We also have to think whether the district welcomes a bazaar. Will think about your view, because if something is very much welcomed by the district, then perhaps we can allow it to go on longer. I think we follow government policy and also consider proposals on their own merit. Any other questions from members? If not, I can continue with my questions, because I'd like to follow up on Mr. Shiu's question, and that is the multi-purpose venue issue. Many organizations have found that it's not easy to apply for a cooked food bazaar because we need to comply with food safety, food hygiene requirements, including an up-to-standard kitchen. I can see that in many FEHD markets, part of it is empty. Sometimes the entire market is empty or lying idle. We have seen the administration say that chief town planners will be asked to revitalize such markets or change the use of such markets. But the FEHD should be the coordinating unit to think about this. So will we try to apply for empty or idle FEHD markets or schools for the operating of bazaars?
So that community kitchens can be set up, and then organizations can have appropriate kitchens for the bazaars. Ms. Wong, can you answer this question? Mr. Chong. Well, actually, my last name is Chang. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I've mistaken your name. Madam Chair, for FEHD markets, FHB is planning to conduct a comprehensive review. Yesterday, at LACHCO, we applied for the creation of a D2 post because we hope that he would lead this review. And the review covers the revitalization or a proper use of markets that are vacated or that are not patronized so much. For existing markets, well, actually for many FEHD markets, there are cooked food centers. So this is one of the options that we will take into account. But of course, the most urgent task now is to set up such a team. Mr. Chang, I think you've misunderstood my question. I'm asking you if the vacated market can be turned into a community kitchen. So preparing food is very important. You need a hygienic place. So would you consider doing this? That is, the market is not used anyway. So can you turn it into a community kitchen? Then when the bazaar operators prepare food, it would be easier and more hygienic. Well, as I said just now, a comprehensive review will be conducted. So the chairwoman's views will be relayed to the relevant team. I cannot tell you right away whether this can be done or not, because we have 101 FEHD markets, and each market has its own different situations. Yes, I understand that you cannot say yes or no right now, but at other meetings, we also got to know this. That is, for these idle markets, well, applications would have to be made to turn such markets into community kitchens. So you need to make this happen. You need to take the lead. This is my view for the FHB. Can you consider this suggestion? That is, applications can be made so that such idle markets can be turned into community kitchens. Members, any other questions? Dr. KWOK. Sorry, Chairman, I'm in the next meeting at the PWSC. I'm in the next room at the PWSC meeting. So now there are many FHD markets that are not being used. Well, we've been waiting for the government's consultant report for ages. It has been dragging its feet. And now we still don't have a concrete report. So before that, is this possible? That is, can you turn some idle FHD markets into community kitchens? Because by doing so, you can really help the grassroots. It's not possible for them to cook food for sale at home, and they need a license to sell cooked food, and it's very difficult to obtain such a license. It's not just about bazaars. Other than bazaars, can they do something like social enterprises? For example, selling lunch boxes to low-income people. Now, in Tinshui, they have to use kitchens in Yuen Long. We hope to help low-income people. So these community kitchens can be run by social enterprises. The kitchens can be used by other social enterprises or the local residents. Now, because the market is there idle, and if you just leave it there, it doesn't help the community. Well, take Yuen Long as an example. Well, on the ground floor of a FHD market, if you sell fish and meats, then yes, there will be many customers. However, not many customers would go onto the second floor or third floor, and many of the stores are not rented out. So these are very appropriate places. Well, I don't think they can give me an answer right away, so maybe they can give us an answer at the next meeting. Now, in those districts that I mentioned just now, there are stores that are not being used. We do not need big sizes. Maybe several dozens of square meters would be very helpful. So can you communicate with the NGOs and try to find out whether this is feasible? We have to start. And I really encourage this. Now we have a new government, so I hope that we can really have new policies. Now, these are very precious resources. In particular, this is land, so we do not want to waste it. Mr. Chang? Yes, at the next meeting, we can provide a paper answering Dr. Kwok's questions. But before Dr. Kwok came in, I was talking about this. Yesterday, at LegCo, we sought for the creation of a post so that he can take the lead in looking at FHT markets. Yes, we understand that. I'm not happy that you are progressing too slowly. So at the ESC, maybe we can add a condition. That is, for this post, he should also be responsible for opening community kitchens in such unused markets. Yes, we hope that post can be created as soon as possible. Well, sometimes we find that if you say that a certain post is to lead something, he doesn't have the power or terms of reference. So, so Dr. Kwok hopes that this can be made more concrete. So members, if you have no questions, then I'll ask my questions. I would like to follow up on Mr. Leung Yiu Chung's question. I think we should ask the government for more details. Now, the HD has the responsibility to consult different stakeholders, and you have to comply with the DMC. So I have questions about DMC. If Link objects and some owners object, eventually does HD has the power to approve Bazaars? Who eventually has to say? Who's going to answer this question? Ms. Choi? Oh, for common areas in public housing estates, they are for residents to use. So, of course, we would support the government's bazaar policy. If organizations have concrete proposals, if they want to set up bazaars in our housing estates, we have to take the views of housing estate stakeholders into consideration, because those common areas may be their passageways. And also, we need to comply with the DMC and the land lease, because the common areas are owned by all the owners. So we need the consent of all owners before the common areas can be used for a certain purpose. So the HD would have to take into account the views of the owners and the lands department. Now, we would consult the estate stakeholders, the lands department, and also through the EMAC, we will consult residents. And if all of them support the setting of a bazaar, of course, then that could be done. And if some of them object, then we will try to find out why. Now, if most of the residents agree, maybe some organizations are very proactive, they collect signatures of residents, and most of the residents support it. But Link objects. So would Link has all the say? Now, if an owner objects, we have to know why. So you need a unanimous agreement. Now, if some of the stakeholders object, we cannot just say yes, because this is not feasible. Any other questions? If not, then I will continue with my questions, because the organizations have numerous questions. Now, in Hong Kong, we have 78 public housing estates that are managed by the HD, and there's no link in them. So, can temporary bazaars be set up in these housing estates so that the residents there can enjoy the provision of better goods? Because without link, it seems that it's easier to set up bazaars. Would the HD conduct a feasibility study? Now, in this housing estates, how much area can be used for this way, and what kind of goods will be needed by the residents? Well, we have given you a table. It means that, well, for the estates on the table, it means that there are no other owners. As Ms. Shu said just now, for the public areas, they can be used for passageway or for sitting out areas. So for each estate is different. An organization may see a site in a certain estate. However, that site may be surrounded by buildings. So it will be very noisy if you organize activities there. So we really have to look at all the details. And what are they selling? Will they be selling food or will they be selling dried goods? These are very different, so we have to look at each and every proposal. Yes, of course, you have to do that. Now, for that 78 estates, link is not in them. So it's not likely that there will be another major owner objecting to the proposal. So 78 estates are not too many. The organizations want to know this. That is, well, for certain estates, you cannot organize music bazaars because it will be too noisy, and in some other estates, the public area may be very small, so you cannot sell fresh food. You can just sell dry goods there. So I think they need a feasibility study for these estates. Then they would know what kind of bazaars they can set up in which estate. Otherwise, they would just encounter numerous obstacles, and they don't even know why. And if that is the case, then you cannot implement the bazaar policy effectively and efficiently. So to facilitate the setting up of bazaars in housing estate, would you conduct a preliminary study so that the organizations know more about this 78 estates? What are their limitations? What are their layouts? And then they would know how to make applications.
Chairman, you have made a good suggestion, but then it is not easy to implement. As I said, the situation is different in different estates. We may provide simple information, but it will not facilitate the organizing of bazaars. So we really have to look at specific applications before we can make a decision. It's not as simple as just saying you can operate it here or there. And since they have different forms, they come in different types as well, it's difficult for me to give a general answer. The information we give is about estates that does not have another owner. But if there are proponents who have specific proposals, we are quite happy to take them up with the FEHD. Mr. Wong, you are repeating. Of course, I understand that you definitely cannot say what type of bazaars can always be organized, but you have to give basic information. Say, for example, this estate is prone to noise because of its configuration, and also how much land can be used for cash transactions because it is a common area. Because if you don't have these specific information, you can always turn down applications without juxtaposing them with the general information. And applicants will find it hard to know how to comply with your requirements. Of course, they can submit their applications and they still may not comply with your requirements, but then they can take it up with you step by step. However, if you do not issue basic information, the ensuing steps cannot take place. And potential applicants are asking you to provide basic information about each estate, maybe a general guide even. Chairman, as we said, if there is not a specific application, it will be very difficult for us to give any initial response. If a proponent has a specific, a concrete proposal, we'll do our best to coordinate. And estates differ. Residents in different districts also have different aspirations. If we say you can always organize a certain type of bazaar at a certain place, it may not represent the views of the residents there. So are you saying that if applicants will submit the same application at all 78 estates, then you will be able to let them know why they would fail, and then they will be able to tap into the basic information about estates. Do they have to do that? DHD will assist the administration to organize bazaars. We will take this up together with the FEH Bureau. This has something to do with food safety and licensing as well. We'll have to look at actual applications. If they cannot comply with the requirements of certain departments, we will let them know. We'll say exactly that. All right. Members, any other questions? If not, I have also exhausted my questions. Let us go into item 3, AOB. Would members like to propose anything? If not, I think we can adjourn the meeting early. Thank you for attending the meeting.